Layla Benson had perfected the art of invisibility as a maid in Prince Kareem Al-Hassan's Dubai palace. But when his fiancée Rania dared her to try on a crimson engagement gown as a cruel joke, and Kareem laughed, saying he'd marry her if she fit into that dress, they made a fatal mistake. They saw a woman whose body they could mock for entertainment, someone far beneath their world of champagne and marble halls. But what none of them knew was that Layla's hands had once created beauty from nothing, that she still carried the soul of a designer they'd never recognize, and that their mockery had just ignited something dangerous. The maid they dismissed was about to transform their joke into a revolution, and by the time they realized who Layla Benson really was, it would be far too late. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun blazed over Dubai's skyline, casting golden rays across the marble floors of Prince Kareem Al-Hassan's palace. Inside the grand ballroom, an army of servants moved like silent shadows, polishing chandeliers that sparkled like frozen waterfalls. Crystal glasses clinked softly as they were arranged on velvet-draped tables. Everything had to be perfect. Prince Kareem's engagement banquet was only hours away, and perfection was the only acceptable standard in this household. Layla Benson wiped sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand, careful not to smudge the glass she was polishing. At 32, she'd learned to make herself invisible in spaces like these. Her dark skin glistened under the ornate lighting, and her uniform clung uncomfortably to her frame. She was what the other staff quietly called full-figured, though Layla preferred to think of herself as simply real in a world obsessed with impossible standards. "Careful with that display, Layla," Amir said, called out from across the room. The head butler's voice carried authority but also warmth. He was one of the few people in this palace who treated her like a human being, rather than a piece of furniture that occasionally moved. Layla nodded and turned her attention to the centerpiece of the evening's decor, a magnificent crimson satin gown suspended on a golden mannequin beneath a spotlight. The dress seemed to breathe with life, its fabric cascading like liquid rubies. She recognized the designer label immediately. Valentina Rossi. Italian. Exclusive. The kind of brand Layla used to sketch copies of when she still believed she could make it in the fashion world. That felt like a lifetime ago now. She reached out to adjust the dress's train, her fingers trembling slightly as they touched the luxurious fabric. The workmanship was exquisite, but as she smoothed a fold near the waist, she noticed something. A tiny tear in the seam, barely visible but definitely there. The imperfection startled her. Even in this world of wealth and glamour, nothing was truly perfect. "Step away from that dress, Maid." The voice sliced through the air like a knife. Layla turned to see Rania Haddad gliding into the ballroom, her designer heels clicking against the marble with rhythmic precision. Kareem's fiancée wore white today, a fitted dress that probably cost more than Layla earned in a year. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, and diamonds dripped from her ears and neck like frozen tears. Behind Rania came Prince Kareem himself, flanked by a small group of well-dressed guests. He cut an impressive figure in his tailored suit, his confident stride filling the room with energy. At 38, Kareem Al-Hassan had the kind of presence that demanded attention. His dark eyes swept across the ballroom, taking inventory of every detail. "Darling, look at my dress," Rania cooed, gesturing toward the crimson gown. "Isn't it divine? Kareem spent a fortune on it. Tell them, Habib. Tell them what you paid." Kareem smiled indulgently. "Enough to feed a village for a year, I suppose. But Rania deserves only the finest." The guests laughed appreciatively. Layla continued polishing glasses nearby, trying to remain invisible as she'd been trained to do. But invisibility was apparently not on Rania's agenda today. "You there," Rania called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. The chubby one. Yes, you. Have you ever owned a mirror? Layla's hands froze mid-polish. Heat crept up her neck as every eye in the room turned toward her. She forced herself to look up, meeting Rania's cruel gaze with as much dignity as she could muster. I'm sorry, ma'am. A mirror, Rania repeated slowly, as if speaking to a child. You know, the thing you look into before leaving the house, or do you simply skip that step entirely? The guests tittered with uncomfortable laughter. Kareem's smile widened, enjoying the entertainment. Layla felt her chest tighten, but she kept her expression neutral. Years of service had taught her how to absorb humiliation without flinching. I apologize if my appearance offends, ma'am, Layla said quietly. Offends? Rania laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Oh, darling, you don't offend me. You amuse me. In fact, she turned to the group with theatrical flair. I have the most wonderful idea. Someone should try on my engagement dress. Make sure it fits properly before tonight. She walked slowly toward Layla, her heels echoing in the suddenly quiet ballroom. When she stopped inches away, Layla could smell her expensive perfume, jasmine and something darker, something that reminded her of funerals. You should try it on, Rania said, her voice sickeningly sweet. After all, we need to make sure it's sized correctly. And you look like you could use a little glamour in your life. The room held its breath. Layla's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't about checking the dress size. This was about cruelty dressed up as humor. I don't think that would be appropriate, ma'am, Layla managed. Oh, don't be shy, Rania insisted, loud enough for everyone to hear. Go ahead, try it on, I dare you. Kareem stepped forward, his eyes dancing with amusement. This I have to see. Go on, try the dress. He paused, then added with a laugh. If she fits into that, I'll marry her myself. The ballroom erupted in laughter. Guests doubled over, wiping tears from their eyes. Even some of the servants smiled nervously, unsure whether to join in or look away. Layla stood frozen, her face burning with shame. The crimson dress hung behind her like a monument to everything she could never have, never be. Such generosity, my prince, one guest said between laughs. But I think your fortune is safe. Layla forced her lips into something resembling a smile. It was either that or cry, and she refused to give them the satisfaction of tears. You're very kind, sir, she said softly to Kareem. But I should return to my duties. Amir appeared at her elbow as if summoned by prayer. Indeed, we have much to prepare before the banquet, if you'll excuse us. He gently guided Layla away from the crowd, his hand steady on her shoulder. As they retreated toward the service corridor, Layla heard Rania's voice behind them. Such a pity. I would have loved to see that zipper try to close. More laughter followed them like cruel shadows. In the quiet of the corridor, Amir stopped and turned to face Layla. His weathered face was full of concern. Don't let them break you, he said softly. People like that measure worth in gold and forget that character is priceless. I'm fine, Layla lied, her voice barely above a whisper. No, you're not, and that's all right. Amir squeezed her shoulder gently before walking away, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the echo of laughter still ringing in her ears. That evening, after her shift finally ended, Layla walked through Dubai's glittering streets toward her small apartment in the old quarter. The contrast was jarring. Around her, towers of glass and steel reached toward the heavens, their windows glowing with wealth and possibility. Luxury cars hummed past, their drivers never glancing at the woman in the maid's uniform trudging along the sidewalk. She felt invisible again, but this time the invisibility was a relief, rather than an insult. When she finally reached her apartment, a modest one-bedroom with barely enough space to breathe, Layla collapsed onto her worn sofa. Her feet ached, her back ached, but more than anything, her heart ached. She reached under the sofa and pulled out an old leather portfolio, its edges frayed from years of handling. Inside were sketches, dozens of them, evening gowns and business suits, casual wear and bridal pieces. Each design represented a dream, a possibility, a version of Layla that had existed before hardship forced her into service. Her fingers traced the lines of a dress she'd designed 5 years ago, back when she still owned a small studio in Haisvetas, the creative district. Back when she still believed talent and hard work were enough. Before the landlord raised the rent. Before her biggest client went bankrupt owing her money. Before everything fell apart. Like a dress with broken stitches. Her phone buzzed. Mira's name lit up the screen. Her younger sister always seemed to call at precisely the right moment, as if connected to Layla's heart by some invisible thread. "Hey, sis!" Mira's cheerful voice filled the silence. "Just checking in. How was your day?" Layla hesitated, then decided on honesty. "They laughed at me today. The prince's fiancé dared me to try on her engagement dress. He said if I fit into it, he'd marry me himself." Silence stretched across the line. Then Mira spoke, her voice fierce. "Those people are empty inside, Layla. They have everything except what matters. That doesn't make it hurt less. I know, but listen to me." Mira's voice softened. "God never wastes pain. Every tear you cry is watering seeds you can't see yet. One day you'll look back on this moment and understand why you had to go through it." Layla closed her eyes, letting her sister's words wash over her. "I want to believe that. Then believe it. You're not just a maid, Layla. You're a designer who happens to clean houses right now. There's a difference." After they said goodbye, Layla stood and walked to her bathroom mirror. She looked at her reflection honestly for the first time in months. Yes, she'd gained weight since her studio closed. Stress and cheap food had taken their toll. Her uniform was faded and shapeless. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. But beneath all of that, she was still Layla Benson. The girl who'd sewn her first dress at age 12. The woman who'd once believed she could change the world one stitch at a time. "If they want to laugh," she whispered to her reflection, "let them. They won't forever." She didn't know how those words would prove prophetic. The next morning arrived with Dubai's usual brilliance, sunlight flooding across the city like liquid gold. Layla returned to the palace for her morning shift, her body heavy with exhaustion, but her mind strangely alert. As she polished silverware in the butler's pantry, she overheard voices from the adjacent room. Rania's distinctive laugh echoed through the doorway, followed by the murmur of her friends' voices. "I'm telling you, the wedding will be absolutely perfect," Rania was saying. "And best of all, having a maid-free ceremony. No servants hovering around, ruining the aesthetics in photos. In fact, I'm planning to fire most of them after the wedding, starting with that chubby one from yesterday." Her friends laughed. "You are absolutely wicked, Rania." "Practical, darling. Practical." The words hit Layla like a physical blow. She'd known service positions were unstable, but hearing it spoken so casually, knowing she was disposable entertainment before her inevitable dismissal, ignited something in her chest. Not anger, exactly. Something cleaner. Something like determination. She finished her shift mechanically, then walked home with new purpose in her stride. That evening, standing in her small apartment, Layla made a decision. She wouldn't seek revenge. Revenge was for people who had nothing better to do with their pain. Instead, she would do something more powerful. She would reclaim herself. She pulled out her old sketches again, but this time she also retrieved something else from the back of her closet. A pair of worn running shoes she'd bought years ago during a brief fitness phase that fizzled out after 3 weeks. Tomorrow, everything would change. The next morning, Layla woke at 4:30, a full hour before her usual alarm. She dressed in old clothes and laced up the running shoes. Her apartment building had 6 floors and no elevator. She started climbing. Up and down. Up and down. Her thighs burned after the second trip. By the 5th, she thought she might die. But she didn't stop. Each step was a small rebellion against every laugh, every cruel word, every moment she'd felt worthless. When she finally stopped, sweat pouring down her face, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. At work, she volunteered for the heaviest tasks. Carrying laundry baskets became weight training. Climbing stairs to deliver meals became cardio. She moved faster, worked harder, and for the first time in forever, it wasn't just to survive. It was to transform. Amir noticed after the first week. One evening, as Layla hefted a basket of linens that would normally require 2 people to carry, he intercepted her in the corridor. "You're going to hurt yourself," he said, but his eyes were curious rather than critical. "I'm fine," Layla replied, setting the basket down with only slightly labored breathing. Amir studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, a small, knowing expression. The kitchen always has leftover meals from the royal chef. Grilled fish, vegetables, things that would just go to waste. It would be a shame to throw them away. Layla met his eyes. "That would be a shame, sir. The staff refrigerator, check it after your shift." He walked away without another word, but Layla understood. He was helping her, quietly supporting her transformation without asking questions or demanding explanations. That night, she found containers of beautiful, healthy food waiting for her. Grilled salmon with herbs, roasted vegetables that tasted like sunshine, quinoa salads that filled her stomach without making her feel sluggish. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, and felt tears prick her eyes. Kindness, when you weren't expecting it, could break your heart in the most beautiful way. Weeks passed. The palace routines continued unchanged, but Layla was changing. Her clothes fit differently. Her breathing came easier. The stairs that once defeated her became just another part of her day. One evening, during a quiet moment in the library where she was dusting shelves, Layla pulled out a scrap of paper and began sketching. Her fingers moved almost without thought, creating lines and curves that suggested a dress. Elegant, powerful, designed for a woman who knew her worth. She was so absorbed in her drawing that she didn't hear footsteps approaching until a voice spoke behind her. "You? A designer?" Layla jumped, nearly dropping her pencil. Prince Kareem stood in the doorway, his expression amused. He must have entered through the private entrance. In his hand was a glass of whiskey, and his tie was loosened as if he'd had a long day. "I didn't mean to disturb you, sir," Layla said quickly, moving to hide her sketch. But Kareem had already seen it. He walked closer, his eyes on the paper rather than her face. "Let me see that." Layla hesitated, then handed over the sketch. Her heart hammered as he studied it. This was the man who'd laughed at her, who'd offered to marry her as a joke. Now he held her dream in his hands. "Interesting," he finally said, but his tone was mocking. "You draw pretty pictures. Do you actually think you could be a designer?" Layla lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. Once, maybe again. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at her quiet confidence. He handed back the sketch. "Everyone has dreams, I suppose, even maids." He walked away, leaving Layla alone with her racing heart and her drawing. That night, talking to Mira on the phone, Layla mentioned the encounter. "He's testing you," Mira said thoughtfully. "People like that don't know what to do with someone who refuses to stay small. I'm not trying to challenge him. Yes, you are. Just by existing, just by dreaming, you're challenging everything he believes about people like us." Mira paused. "Listen, there's a competition coming up. Local Artisan Showcase. It's sponsored by some fashion house. I think Kareem partially owns it, actually. You should enter." Layla's stomach twisted. "I can't." "Why not?" "Because if I fail, it proves them right. If I succeed, I lose everything. Either way, I'm trapped." "Or," Mira said gently, "you could use a pseudonym. Submit anonymously. Let your work speak for itself." The idea took root in Layla's mind like a seed finding fertile ground. A pseudonym. A way to test herself without risking everything. "LB Atelier," she whispered. "What?" "That's what I'd call myself. LB Atelier." Mira laughed with delight. "Then do it, sis. Show them what you're made of." Over the next 2 weeks, Layla worked on her submission during every spare moment. She sketched during lunch breaks, refined details while waiting for laundry to finish, and dreamed in fabric and thread. But submitting wasn't enough. She needed to create something real, something tangible. She began collecting discarded materials from the palace laundry. A piece of silk with a wine stain that could be cut around, satin scraps from hem alterations, lace trim that Rania had rejected for being too common. Late at night in her apartment, Layla sewed. Her fingers moved with muscle memory, creating something beautiful from discards and dreams. Meanwhile, at the palace, Rania's cruelty intensified. She seemed to sense something changing in Layla, some shift in posture or confidence, and it infuriated her. "You're moving slower today," Rania snapped one afternoon, though Layla was actually working faster than ever. "Perhaps you've been eating too many sweets." The old Layla would have apologized. The new Layla simply said, "I'll work harder, ma'am," and continued with her tasks. That small refusal to be diminished seemed to enrage Rania more than any argument could have. She began assigning Layla impossible workloads, scrubbing floors that didn't need scrubbing, polishing silver that was already spotless, reorganizing storage rooms that were already organized. Layla did it all without complaint, treating each task as another opportunity to build strength and endurance. Her body grew leaner and stronger. Her mind grew clearer and more focused. One night, after a particularly brutal shift, Layla collapsed onto her bed fully clothed. Every muscle ached. Her hands were raw from chemicals and scrubbing. She wanted to cry, to give up, to accept that maybe she was meant to remain invisible forever. Instead, she whispered Kareem's mocking words into the darkness. "If she fits into that, I'll marry her myself." The memory didn't hurt anymore. It fueled her. She dragged herself to the mirror and studied her reflection. Her face looked different now, sharper, more defined. Her body was changing, yes, but more importantly, something inside her was changing. She was remembering who she'd been before the world convinced her to shrink. The next morning, a letter arrived. Plain white envelope, no return address. Layla's hands shook as she opened it. "Congratulations, LB Atelier. Your submission has been shortlisted for the Artisan Showcase. Please prepare to present your work at the exhibition on March 15th. Layla read the letter 3 times, certain it must be a mistake. But there it was, in official letterhead and everything. Her work, her dream, had been noticed. She sank onto her sofa and burst into tears. Not tears of sadness this time, tears of hope. The first real hope she'd felt in years. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty apartment, to God, to the universe, to whatever force had decided she deserved this chance. "Thank you." She looked at the crimson fabric draped over her sewing table, her own version of the dress that had humiliated her, transformed now into something entirely her own. Something that carried her story, her pain, her resilience. Layla Benson was no longer just a maid who'd been laughed at by a prince. She was an artist on the verge of reclaiming her voice, and she was just getting started. Layla's acceptance letter remained tucked inside her pillowcase, a secret she touched every morning like a talisman. The exhibition was 3 weeks away, and she still hadn't figured out how to attend without losing her job. But sometimes faith meant moving forward, even when the path wasn't clear. What she didn't know was that her submission had already caused ripples in circles far above her station. In a glass-walled office overlooking Dubai Marina, 3 competition judges sat reviewing entries. One of them was Marcus Whitfield, a British fashion consultant who handled acquisitions for Kareem's investment portfolio. "This LB Atelier piece is remarkable," Marcus said, holding up the photograph of Layla's design. "The craftsmanship is flawless, but more than that, there's emotion in every seam. You can feel the story it's trying to tell." "Anonymous submission," another judge noted. "No portfolio, no credentials, just this single piece." "Sometimes that's all you need," Marcus replied. "Raw talent speaks louder than pedigree. I'm voting to shortlist." The other judges agreed. Within days, the list was published online. LB Atelier's name appeared among designers with established studios and wealthy backers. Layla saw it on her phone during a bathroom break at the palace and had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. She was competing. Actually competing. The exhibition required physical attendance. Designers would set up small displays, answer questions from judges and the public, and the winner would be chosen based on both craftsmanship and presentation. Layla needed a full day off, something she'd never requested in 2 years of service. That evening, she approached Amir in the staff quarters. He was reviewing the next week's schedule, his reading glasses perched on his nose. "Sir, I need to ask for something," Layla began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Amir looked up. "Go on." "I need March 15th off, a full day. It's for family. A sick relative." She hated lying to him, but the truth felt too fragile to speak aloud. If she said it was for the competition, and somehow Kareem or Rania found out, they'd find a way to sabotage her. Amir studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Family is important. I'll mark you down for personal leave." "Thank you, sir." "Layla." He removed his glasses and his expression grew serious. "Whatever you're doing, I hope it brings you peace." She realized then that he knew she was lying, but he was choosing to trust her anyway. The kindness nearly undid her. For the next 3 weeks, Layla worked like a woman possessed. By day, she served at the palace, enduring Rania's increasingly creative cruelties. By night, she sewed. Her fingers developed new calluses. Her eyes burned from close work under dim lighting. But slowly, miraculously, her dress came together. She'd taken the essence of Rania's crimson gown, the flowing silhouette, the dramatic train, and transformed it into something entirely her own. She used repurposed satin in a deep burgundy shade, overlaid with delicate lace she'd salvaged from discarded curtains. The bodice was hand-embroidered with tiny beads she'd collected one by one from broken costume jewelry the palace staff had thrown away. It was a dress made from scraps and determination. A dress that whispered rather than shouted. A dress that said you don't need wealth to create beauty. Mira came over the night before the exhibition to help Layla prepare. She brought a garment bag and a small makeup kit. "You're going to walk in there with your head high," Mira said firmly, helping Layla press the dress one final time. "You're not just LB Atelier. You're Layla Benson, and you're brilliant. What if they laugh at me? What if they see I'm just a maid playing dress-up? Then they're blind." Mira took her sister's hands. "Listen to me. You've been made small for so long that you've forgotten your actual size. Tomorrow you stand tall. Promise me." "I promise." That night, Layla barely slept. She rehearsed what she'd say if judges asked about her background, her training, her inspiration. Every imagined conversation ended with someone recognizing her as Kareem's maid, and the room erupting in laughter. But morning came regardless of her fears. The exhibition was held at the Dubai Design District, in a converted warehouse with soaring ceilings and natural light that poured through skylights like liquid gold. Layla arrived early, her dress carefully packed, her hands trembling as she signed in under her pseudonym. The organizer, a cheerful woman named Beth Thompson, showed her to her assigned space, a simple white booth with a table and a dress form. "You've got 2 hours to set up before the doors open," Beth said. "Judges will circulate throughout the day. The public vote happens tonight. Good luck." Layla looked around at the other booths. Designer after designer unpacked professional lighting, printed portfolios, branded signage. One exhibitor had a full-length mirror framed in gold. Another had a promotional video playing on a tablet. Layla had her dress, a hand-lettered sign that said LB Atelier, and a small bouquet of wildflowers Mira had insisted she bring. She carefully dressed the mannequin, adjusting the shoulders and smoothing the fabric. The dress caught the natural light beautifully, the burgundy satin glowing like embers. The lace overlay added texture and depth. The beadwork sparkled subtly at the neckline and cuffs. It wasn't the most expensive piece in the exhibition, but it had something the others lacked: a soul. The doors opened at 10. Within minutes, the warehouse filled with fashion students, bloggers, industry professionals, and curious members of the public. Layla stood beside her display, trying to look confident while her stomach churned. People drifted past, some pausing to glance at her work before moving on to flashier displays. A few stopped to ask questions. "What's your brand philosophy?" one young woman asked. "Creating beauty from what others overlook," Layla answered. Finding value in the discarded." An older man in expensive shoes examined the beadwork closely. "This is hand-stitched?" "Yes, sir, every bead." "Impressive patience. You don't see that much anymore." As the morning wore on, Layla noticed more people lingering at her booth. They touched the fabric gently, asked about her techniques, took photos. A small crowd began to form. Then Marcus Whitfield appeared. Layla recognized him from the judge's panel photo. Tall, silver-haired, with sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "LB Atelier," he said, extending his hand. "I'm Marcus, one of the judges. This piece is extraordinary." "Thank you, sir. Tell me about your process. Where did you source these materials?" Layla's mouth went dry. If she told the truth, that she'd salvaged everything from a wealthy household's trash, would it diminish her work or prove her resourcefulness? "I believe in sustainable fashion," she said carefully. "These materials were destined for disposal. I gave them new life." Marcus's eyes lit up. "Upcycling. Brilliant. The fashion industry's waste problem is catastrophic. More designers should follow your example." He leaned closer, studying the embroidery. "You have formal training?" "I'm self-taught, sir. I had a small studio once, before circumstances changed." "Life happens to all of us." His tone was kind. "What matters is what we create from the ruins." He made notes on his tablet, asked a few more questions, then moved on. But Layla saw him glance back at her booth twice, as if reassessing something. By afternoon, a steady stream of visitors had voted for her piece in the public choice category. Layla overheard conversations, people calling her work authentic, moving, the kind of design that reminds you why you fell in love with fashion. She was beginning to believe she might actually have a chance. Then Rania walked in. Layla's blood froze. Kareem's fiancée swept through the warehouse with 2 friends, all 3 women dressed in designer labels and carrying shopping bags from expensive boutiques. They were laughing about something, their voices carrying across the space. Layla turned away, praying Rania wouldn't notice her. But of course, fate had other plans. "Oh, look at this one," Rania's voice rang out. She'd stopped at Layla's booth, though she clearly didn't recognize the maid standing beside it. How quaint. It's like something from a vintage shop. Her friends giggled. One of them, a blonde woman in Chanel, leaned forward to examine the dress. Is this supposed to be upcycled, or just cheap? There's a difference, Rania said, and they all laughed. Layla kept her head down, her heart hammering. She'd lost weight and wore her hair differently today, but if Rania looked at her face, the game would be over. The beadwork is actually quite nice, the third friend admitted, a slight note of surprise in her voice. Please, Rania scoffed. Anyone with enough time and patience could do this. Real design requires vision, not just craft. She moved closer to read the sign. LB Atelier. Never heard of them. Probably some nobody from the slums trying to break into real fashion. The words hit Layla like physical blows, but she forced herself to remain still and silent. After what felt like an eternity, Rania and her friends moved on, their laughter fading into the crowd noise. Layla exhaled shakily. The slums. That's what Rania thought of anyone without money or connections. And the worst part was that she wasn't entirely wrong. Layla's neighborhood was exactly the kind of place Rania would dismiss without a second thought. But that dress hanging on the mannequin? That dress proved that slums could produce beauty, that poor hands could create art, that a maid could be an artist. Evening approached. The judges gathered to announce the winners. Layla's booth had received the most public votes by a significant margin, but the final decision combined public opinion with the judge's assessment. Beth Thompson stepped onto a small platform with a microphone. Thank you all for attending today's Artisan Showcase. We've seen remarkable talent from established designers and emerging voices alike. Layla's hands twisted together. She'd done what she came to do, proved to herself that her work had value. Winning didn't matter, except it did. It mattered terribly. The judges were particularly impressed by one designer who embodied the spirit of this competition: innovation, sustainability, and emotional resonance. The winner of this year's showcase is LB Atelier. The crowd erupted in applause. Layla stood frozen, unable to process what she'd heard. LB, are you here? Beth called out, shading her eyes to scan the crowd. Mira's voice echoed in her memory. Stand tall. Remember your size. Layla raised her hand. I'm here. Beth beamed. Come on up. Walking to that platform felt like walking through water. Every step required conscious effort. The crowd parted, and Layla climbed the stairs on shaking legs. Congratulations, Beth said, handing her a small trophy and an envelope. Tell us about yourself. The microphone felt heavy in Layla's hand. She looked out at the crowd. Designers who'd spent thousands on their displays, industry professionals who defined success, and somewhere out there, Rania Haddad, who'd called her work the product of slums. My name is Layla Benson, she said, her voice gaining strength. I'm a self-taught designer. I believe fashion should be accessible, sustainable, and honest. This dress represents my philosophy, that beauty doesn't require wealth, just vision and dedication. The crowd applauded again. Marcus Whitfield caught her eye and nodded approvingly. As Layla stepped off the platform, several people approached with business cards and offers. A boutique owner wanted to carry her designs. A fashion blogger asked for an interview. A textile company offered to donate materials. She accepted their cards with trembling hands, overwhelmed and terrified and more hopeful than she'd been in years. The exhibition ended at 9. Layla carefully packed her dress, her trophy, and her new contacts. She was walking toward the exit when her phone buzzed. Amir's name appeared on the screen. Hello? Layla. His voice was urgent. There's a sandstorm coming. A bad one. They're advising everyone to shelter in place. Where are you? She looked out the warehouse windows. The sky had turned an ominous orange-brown. Wind whipped debris across the parking lot. I'm at the design district. I can probably make it home before... No, it's moving too fast. Go to the nearest shelter or solid building. The palace is on lockdown. Staff and guests are all staying put until it passes. Understood. Thank you for letting me know. Layla joined the crowd of exhibition attendees being directed to the warehouse's reinforced basement. Someone had set up emergency supplies, water, blankets, battery-powered lights. She settled into a corner, her dress beside her like a companion. This wasn't how she'd imagined the day ending, but then again, nothing had gone as she'd imagined, and somehow, that had turned out to be a blessing. At the palace, the sandstorm struck with biblical fury. Windows rattled in their frames. The marble hallways echoed with the howl of wind. All exterior doors were sealed. The skeleton staff that remained, Amir, 3 other servants, and Layla's replacement for the day, worked to secure loose items and prepare rooms for the guests trapped by the storm. Kareem stood in his study, watching the sand batter against bulletproof glass. Rania had gone home before the storm hit, thank God. He'd spent the day at meetings and returned to find his palace in emergency mode. "Sir, would you like dinner served in your quarters?" Amir appeared in the doorway. "Where's the regular staff?" "Most were off duty when the storm hit. They've sheltered elsewhere. We have a reduced team tonight." Kareem nodded. "I'll eat in the dining room. No point in hiding from a storm." "Very good, sir." An hour later, Kareem sat alone at his enormous dining table, picking at a meal he barely tasted. The storm raged outside, and for some reason it made him think of his mother. She'd died 5 years ago, and he still missed her with an ache that time hadn't diminished. She'd been a designer once, before marrying his father. She'd given up her career for marriage and family, and Kareem had never quite understood if she regretted that choice. In her final months, she'd returned to sketching, filling notebooks with designs she'd never create. "Your mother had such talent," his father had said at her funeral. "I wish I'd encouraged her more." Kareem pushed his food around his plate, lost in memory. He barely noticed when Amir entered with fresh water. "Sir, if I may say something." "Of course." "Your mother would be proud of the man you've become." Kareem looked up, surprised. "You knew her well." "I served her for 15 years. She was the kindest woman I've ever known." Amir paused. "She believed everyone deserved dignity, regardless of their station. She treated staff like family." "I know." Kareem's voice was quiet. "Sometimes I wonder if I've forgotten that." "It's never too late to remember, sir." After Amir left, Kareem sat alone with his thoughts and the sound of wind howling through marble halls. Somewhere in the palace, a door banged repeatedly. He should probably check on it, though the staff would handle it eventually. Instead, he found himself walking through empty corridors, his footsteps echoing. He ended up in the ballroom where the engagement banquet had been held weeks ago. The space was dark except for emergency lighting that cast long shadows across the floor. He remembered the maid, Layla, he thought her name was, standing beside Rania's dress while his guests laughed. He'd laughed too. It had seemed harmless at the time, just a joke at someone else's expense. But he'd seen her face as she walked away, the quiet dignity in her forced smile, the way she'd held herself together when anyone else might have crumbled or lashed out. She'd sketched in the library that day. He'd mocked her dreams, called them pretty pictures, suggested that maids couldn't be designers. Why had he done that? What had she ever done to deserve his cruelty? The sandstorm howled louder, as if responding to his thoughts. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving Dubai covered in a fine layer of sand like powdered sugar on a cake. Layla emerged from the warehouse shelter exhausted, but exhilarated. She'd won. Actually won. The trophy in her bag felt real and solid, proof that she wasn't crazy for believing in herself. She made it back to her apartment, showered off the sand and sweat, and fell into bed. When she woke hours later, her phone was full of messages. Mira congratulating her. Beth asking about follow-up interviews, and several unknown numbers, likely the people who'd asked for her contact information at the exhibition. One message stood out. It was from an unlisted number with a brief text. Congratulations, LB Atelier. Your work caught many eyes yesterday, including mine. I'd like to commission a piece for an upcoming gala. Name your price. Al-Hassan. Layla's blood turned to ice. Kareem. The message was from Kareem. He wanted to buy her design for Rania's gala. The same Rania who'd called her work the product of slums. Layla stared at her phone, her mind racing. This was impossible. If Kareem bought her design, if she accepted the commission, her secret identity would be in jeopardy. Someone would eventually connect LB Atelier to the palace Maid. But refusing meant losing the biggest opportunity of her career. Kareem's endorsement would open doors she couldn't even imagine. She typed 3 responses and deleted them all. Finally, she wrote, "Thank you for your interest. I'll consider your offer." Non-committal. Safe. Temporary. But she knew this storm, the one brewing in her life, was just beginning. 2 days later, Layla returned to the palace for her regular shift. She'd decided to pretend the competition had never happened, to keep her 2 worlds separate for as long as possible. That plan lasted approximately 3 hours. She was arranging flowers in the main gallery when Amir found her. "Layla, Prince Kareem has requested you bring tea to his study." Her hands froze mid-arrangement. "Me specifically?" "He asked for you by name." Layla's mouth went dry. Did he know? Had someone told him? She forced herself to breathe normally. "Of course, I'll prepare it now." 10 minutes later, she stood outside Kareem's study, balancing a silver tea service and trying to control her shaking hands. She knocked. "Enter." Kareem sat behind his desk, dressed casually in a white shirt with rolled sleeves. Papers covered his workspace, and his laptop screen showed what looked like financial reports. He glanced up as she entered. "Ah, Layla, thank you." He gestured to the side table. "You can leave it there." She moved carefully, setting down the tray without rattling the cups. A small miracle given her nerves. "Sir, will there be anything else?" "Actually, yes. Sit for a moment." Her heart hammered. "Sir, I should return to my duties." "It's fine. Amir knows you're here." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "I wanted to ask you something. You sketch, don't you? I saw you in the library." "Sometimes, sir." "You said you might design again. Did you mean that?" Layla met his eyes, uncertain where this was going. "I'd like to, yes. Someday." "Why did you stop?" The question surprised her with its directness. She could lie, give a simple answer. But something in his expression, a genuine curiosity without the usual mocking edge, made her answer honestly. "My studio failed, sir. I couldn't pay rent. My biggest client went bankrupt and never paid me for 3 months of work. I lost everything except my sketches and my skill. Service work was the only way to survive." Kareem was quiet for a moment. That must have been difficult. It was necessary. There's a difference between necessary and easy. He poured himself tea, then offered her a cup. She hesitated, but refusing would be rude. She accepted it with trembling hands. "My mother was a designer," Kareem said suddenly, his voice softer. "Before she married my father, she gave it up for family. I think she regretted that, though she never said so directly." He stared into his tea. "In her last year, she told me she wished she'd found a way to do both, to be a wife and mother and still create. She said giving up her art meant giving up a piece of her soul." Layla didn't know what to say. This vulnerable side of Kareem felt dangerous, like a trap she might fall into. "Why are you telling me this, sir?" He looked up and something in his eyes had changed. Because I've been thinking about that day. The engagement, party, what I said to you. It was cruel. I'm not apologizing, he added quickly. Not exactly, but I'm acknowledging it. I understand, sir. Do you? He set down his cup. I don't think you do. I don't think I do either. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the garden. My mother would have been ashamed of me that day. She always said that privilege comes with responsibility, and I've been failing that responsibility for a long time. Layla remained silent, afraid to speak and break whatever spell had fallen over this moment. There's a designer, Kareem continued, still facing the window. Calls themselves LB Atelier, won a competition 2 days ago. Their work is remarkable, sustainable, emotional, honest. Everything my mother believed fashion should be. He turned back to face her. I want to commission a piece from them for the humanitarian gala next month, but they haven't responded to my offer yet. Layla's pulse thundered in her ears. He was talking about her, to her, about her. Perhaps they're considering their options, sir. Perhaps, he smiled slightly, or perhaps they don't trust me. Can't say I'd blame them. I haven't given many people reason to trust me lately. I should go, sir. My duties. Of course. He waved her toward the door. Thank you for the tea. And Layla? She paused at the doorway. Yes, sir. Don't give up on your sketches. You have talent. I shouldn't have dismissed that. She nodded, unable to speak, and fled the study. That evening, Layla sat in her apartment with her phone in one hand and her future in the other. Kareem's message still waited for her response. His words from the study echoed in her mind. He'd almost apologized. He'd opened up about his mother. He'd acknowledged his cruelty. Was it genuine? Or was this some elaborate game she couldn't see the edges of? She thought of the dress hanging in her closet, the burgundy gown that had won the competition, the dress made from scraps and hope, the dress that had given her back her voice. She thought of Kareem's mother, giving up her art and regretting it forever. She thought of Mira saying, God never wastes pain. Finally, she typed a response. I accept your commission. I'll create something worthy of your mother's memory. Thank you for the opportunity. LB Atelier. She hit send before she could change her mind. A minute later, her phone buzzed with his reply. Thank you. I look forward to meeting you in person to discuss details. My assistant will arrange a meeting next week. Layla stared at the message. Meeting. In person. Next week. The two halves of her life were about to collide, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. She walked to her window and looked out at Dubai's glittering skyline. Somewhere in one of those towers, Kareem was probably working late, unaware that the mysterious designer he'd commissioned was the same maid he'd humiliated. You wanted to stand out, she whispered to her, reflection. Looks like you're about to. The next morning, a package arrived at the palace. Amir signed for it and carried it to Kareem's study, a large box marked LB Atelier with careful handling instructions. Inside was the burgundy gown that had won the competition, along with a handwritten note, a prototype to demonstrate my work. The commissioned piece will be created specifically for your gala's theme. With gratitude, LB. Kareem opened the box in private and lifted out the dress carefully. The fabric seemed to glow in his hands, and the craftsmanship was extraordinary. Every stitch was perfect. Every bead was placed with intention. But more than the technical skill, there was something else. An emotion embedded in the fabric. A story told through texture and color. He held the dress up to the light and noticed something. The lace overlay formed a subtle pattern. Flowers growing through cracks, blooming despite damaged foundations. Beauty from ruins, he thought, just like she'd said. He called his assistant immediately. Set up the meeting with LB Atelier. I want it here at the palace. Make sure they're treated with full respect. Car service, refreshments, whatever they need. Of course, sir. Any particular day? Kareem glanced at his calendar. Next Wednesday, afternoon. No, wait, make it evening, after the regular staff has left. He didn't want interruptions. He wanted to meet this designer properly, to understand the mind behind the work. What he didn't know was that the designer would be working in his palace that same day, dusting his shelves and polishing his floors, invisible in plain sight. 1 week until the two worlds collided. 1 week until Layla Benson had to decide whether to reveal her truth or maintain her carefully constructed double life. 1 week until everything changed. Wednesday arrived like a storm that had been building for weeks. Layla's identity reveal meeting with Kareem was scheduled for 7 that evening, after her shift ended at 6. She'd have exactly 1 hour to transform from palace maid to acclaimed designer, and the impossibility of it made her stomach twist into knots. She'd decided on honesty. There was no other choice. Walking into that meeting and pretending to be someone else would only make the eventual truth more devastating. Better to control the narrative than let it explode in her face. But before that meeting could happen, everything changed. That morning, Kareem made an announcement that rippled through the palace like an earthquake. He was hosting an impromptu reception that very evening, a preview gala for major donors to his humanitarian foundation. The event had been planned for weeks, but he'd moved it up suddenly, wanting to showcase the mysterious LB Atelier's work to potential investors before the official commission meeting. All staff on duty tonight, Amir informed the household during the morning briefing. Full formal service. The prince wants everything. Perfect. Layla's world tilted. She was supposed to meet Kareem as LB Atelier at 7, but now she'd be working the event as a maid at the same time. The two identities were colliding faster than she'd anticipated, and there was no way to stop it. She pulled Amir aside after the briefing. "Sir, about tonight." "I know," he said quietly, his eyes kind but firm. "Whatever you're facing, you'll handle it. Trust yourself." She wanted to explain, to ask for help, but guests were already arriving for pre-event setup meetings. There was no time. By 6 o'clock, the ballroom glowed with golden light. The same space where Layla had been humiliated now hosted elegant cocktail tables draped in cream silk. A string quartet played softly in the corner. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. And at the center of the room, beneath a spotlight that made it shine like captured fire, stood Layla's burgundy dress on a golden mannequin. Kareem had displayed it as the evening's centerpiece. A small placard read, "Original design by LB Atelier. Preview of commissioned work for the Al-Hassan Humanitarian Foundation." Layla stood in the shadows near the service entrance, her maid's uniform crisp and her heart hammering. She was supposed to be adjusting floral arrangements, but she couldn't stop staring at her dress. Her work. Her soul laid bare for these wealthy strangers to judge. Gorgeous piece, isn't it? She turned to find another server beside her, James, a young man from California who worked part-time while studying business. "Yes," Layla managed. "It's beautiful. The designer's supposed to show up tonight. Some mystery person. Prince Kareem's been talking about them all day." James grinned. "Apparently they're from humble beginnings. Real rags to riches story." Layla's throat tightened. "Is that so?" "Yeah. The prince seems genuinely excited about it. I've never seen him like this over fashion before." James was called away to refill champagne glasses, leaving Layla alone with her thoughts. Guests began arriving in earnest. Wealthy donors in designer suits and glittering jewelry. business associates who'd flown in from Europe and Asia, and unfortunately, inevitably, Rania Haddad. Kareem's fiancée made an entrance worthy of royalty, wearing a white gown that probably cost more than a car. Her friends flanked her like an honor guard, and her laughter carried across the ballroom, like breaking glass. "Darling," Rania called out to Kareem, who stood greeting guests near the entrance. "What's this I hear about some secret designer? How dramatic." "You'll meet them soon enough," Kareem replied, kissing her cheek with what looked like obligation rather than affection. "I think you'll be impressed." Rania drifted toward the center display with her entourage. Layla busied herself straightening already perfect napkins at a nearby table, her back turned but her ears straining to hear. "This is the piece everyone's talking about." Rania's voice dripped with skepticism. She circled the mannequin slowly, examining the dress from every angle. "It's quaint, very arts and crafts. I think it's stunning," one of the guests nearby said, a woman Layla recognized as Sarah Montgomery, a fashion journalist. "The sustainability aspect is brilliant. Using discarded materials to create something this refined? That takes real vision. Or desperation," Rania muttered, loud enough for her friends to hear and giggle. Layla's hands clenched around the napkin she was holding. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to stay calm. Soon this would all be over. Soon everyone would know the truth. The question was, which truth would destroy her first? At 7 o'clock, Kareem stepped onto the small stage where the quartet had been playing. The music stopped. Conversations faded. All eyes turned to the prince. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Kareem began, his voice warm and confident. "Many of you know about the humanitarian foundation my late mother inspired me to create. She believed that art and compassion should walk hand in hand, that beauty has the power to change lives." He gestured toward the burgundy dress. "This piece represents everything she believed in. It's made from materials others discarded. It required patience, skill, and vision. Most importantly, it tells a story of transformation, taking what the world calls worthless and revealing its hidden value." The crowd murmured approvingly. Layla stood frozen near the kitchen entrance, her pulse roaring in her ears. "The designer behind this work has shown us that true class needs no title," Kareem continued. "That talent can emerge from anywhere, if we're willing to see it. Tonight, I'm honored to introduce you to L.B. Atelier." He paused, scanning the crowd expectantly. "Please join me on stage." Silence fell across the ballroom. Heads turned, looking for someone to step forward. But Layla remained paralyzed, her feet refusing to move. This was it, the moment that would change everything. And she couldn't make herself take a single step. "L.B.?" Kareem called out again, a note of confusion entering his voice. "Are you here?" Amir appeared beside Layla so quietly she almost jumped. "Now or never," he whispered. "Choose who you want to be." His words broke through her paralysis. She thought of Mira saying, "Stand tall." She thought of her mother, who'd taught her to sew when she was barely old enough to hold a needle. She thought of every laugh, every insult, every moment she'd been made to feel invisible. She stepped into the light. Walking across that ballroom felt like walking through water. Every step required conscious thought. She was vaguely aware of heads turning, of confused murmurs spreading through the crowd like ripples in a pond. Kareem's expression shifted from confusion to shock as he recognized her. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Layla reached the stage and climbed the steps with shaking legs. She stood, beside Kareem, facing the crowd of wealthy strangers and the few staff members brave enough to watch from the shadows. "My name is Layla Benson," she said, her voice quieter than she'd intended. She cleared her throat and tried again, stronger this time. "I'm L.B. Atelier. I designed this dress." The ballroom erupted. Cameras flashed as journalists recognized a story. Guests turned to their neighbors, whispering urgently. Near the center display, Rania's face had gone completely white. "You?" Rania's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "The maid? This is a joke." "No joke," Sarah Montgomery called out, her journalist instincts fully engaged. "Are you saying you work here, as staff?" Layla nodded, her hands trembling but her voice steady. "I've been employed here for 2 years. Before that, I owned a small design studio that failed. I took service work to survive, but I never stopped creating." "This is ridiculous," Rania said, pushing through the crowd toward the stage. "Kareem, surely you don't believe this. She probably stole that design from someone else." "I didn't steal anything," Layla said firmly, meeting Rania's furious gaze. "Every stitch in that dress was sewn by my hands. The lace came from old palace curtains marked for disposal. The beads came from broken jewelry thrown away by the household. I created beauty from what you considered worthless." "How dare you?" "She's telling the truth." Marcus Whitfield stepped forward from the crowd. "I judged the competition. The craftsmanship is clearly hand-done. No one could fake that level of detailed work." He looked at Layla with respect. "I knew there was a powerful story behind this piece. I just didn't realize how powerful." Kareem finally found his voice. "Layla, why didn't you tell me?" She turned to face him, and for the first time that evening, she saw past her fear to the man standing beside her. The man who'd mocked her. The man who'd started to change. The man who'd commissioned her work without knowing who she was. "Would you have believed me?" she asked softly. "If I'd come to you as your maid and said I was a designer, would you have taken me seriously? Or would you have laughed, like you laughed when you said you'd marry me if I fit into that dress?" The silence that fell was absolute. Every person in that ballroom held their breath, waiting for Kareem's response. His face showed a dozen emotions: shock, embarrassment, realization, and something that might have been respect. "You're right," he said finally. "I wouldn't have believed you. I would have dismissed you without a second thought." He turned to address the crowd, his voice carrying clearly. "This woman proved something tonight that I needed to learn. That I've been blind to the humanity beneath the titles I assign people. That wealth doesn't equal worth." Rania made a sound like a wounded animal. "You're defending her? After she deceived you? After she stole palace property to make her little dress?" "Discarded property," Amir's voice rang out from the crowd. The head butler stepped forward, and every staff member present straightened with attention. "Materials marked for disposal in the household logs. I can provide documentation if needed. Miss Benson took nothing that wasn't already designated as waste." "And even if she had," Sarah Montgomery added, her phone out and recording now, "the story here isn't theft. It's transformation. A woman working 2 jobs, one to survive, one to follow her dream, who created award-winning art from scraps." That's the real headline. Other guests began nodding, murmuring agreement. The narrative was shifting, and Rania could feel her control slipping away. "This is absurd," she hissed. "Kareem, are you really going to let these people turn your maid into some kind of hero? She lied to you. She manipulated you into commissioning her work." "I commissioned quality," Kareem interrupted, his voice firm. "I commissioned vision and talent. The fact that it came from someone I'd dismissed and underestimated, that's my failing, not hers." Rania's perfect mask cracked completely. "Fine. Choose the maid over me. See if I care." She yanked off her engagement ring and threw it at Kareem's feet. The diamond bounced once on the stage before rolling into shadow. "We're done. And when everyone realizes what a fool you've made of yourself, don't come crawling back." She stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking angrily against marble. Her friends scrambled to follow, their faces a mixture of shock and delight at the drama. At the doorway, Rania turned back one final time. Enjoy your moment, Maid. But remember, you'll always be just a maid who got lucky. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her. The ballroom remained silent for a heartbeat. Then Sarah Montgomery started clapping. Another guest joined in, then another. Within seconds, the entire room erupted in applause. Layla stood on the stage, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by the sound of hands coming together in recognition of her courage. Kareem stood beside her, and when their eyes met, she saw something she'd never expected to find there. Respect. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests surrounded Layla with questions and business cards. Sarah Montgomery conducted a formal interview right there in the ballroom. Marcus Whitfield introduced her to 3 boutique owners. A textile manufacturer offered to donate materials for her next collection. Through it all, Kareem remained nearby, not hovering but present. Available if she needed support but respectful of her moment. It was nearly midnight when the last guests departed. The ballroom slowly emptied, leaving Layla standing beside her dress, exhausted and overwhelmed. Kareem approached carefully, as if afraid she might bolt. "Layla, I owe you an apology. You already apologized, kind of, earlier this week. That wasn't enough." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that made him look younger and more uncertain. "What I said at the engagement party, what I implied about your worth based on your appearance and position, that was cruel. There's no excuse for it. You were showing off for your guests. I understand how these things work. That doesn't make it right." He looked at her directly. "My mother would have been ashamed of me that day. She would have seen your talent immediately. She would have encouraged you, hired you, made sure you succeeded." His voice dropped. "Instead, you got me. Someone who measured people by all the wrong things." Layla studied his face, seeing genuine remorse there. "People can change. I want to. I'm trying to." He gestured to the dress. "This piece you created, it's extraordinary. And I don't just mean the craftsmanship. I mean what it represents. You took my cruelty and transformed it into art. That takes a kind of strength I'm only beginning to understand. I didn't do it to prove anything to you. I know. You did it for yourself. That's what makes it powerful." He paused. "The commission still stands, if you want it. Not because of tonight's drama, but because I genuinely believe your work deserves to be seen. The Humanitarian Foundation needs designers who understand what it means to struggle, to rise, to transform. That's you." Layla felt tears prick her eyes again. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Or say you need time to think. But please don't say no because of my past behavior. Don't let my mistakes steal this opportunity from you." She looked at her dress one more time, the burgundy fabric glowing in the dimmed lighting, every bead and stitch a testament to her persistence. Then she looked back at Kareem and saw not the prince who'd mocked her, but the man who was learning to see beyond surfaces. "Yes," she said softly. "I'll accept the commission, but on one condition." "Name it." "No special treatment. I work for this. I earn every opportunity based on the quality of what I create, not because you feel guilty or want good publicity." Kareem smiled. A real smile, not the practiced one he wore for guests. "Deal. Though I should warn you, I have high standards." "So do I." He extended his hand. "Then I look forward to working with you, Miss Benson." She shook it, feeling the warmth of his palm against hers. "Call me Layla." The next morning, Dubai social media exploded. Hashtags like Maid to designer and Layla Benson trended within hours. Sarah Montgomery's article went viral, complete with photos of Layla standing beside Kareem on stage, her maid's uniform visible beneath the ballroom's golden light. Some comments were supportive. Many were cruel. Rania's friends launched a campaign suggesting Layla had seduced Kareem or stolen designs. Conservative voices criticized her for aspiring above her station. Fashion snobs called her work peasant craft. But for every negative comment, 10 positive ones appeared. Women from working-class backgrounds shared their own stories. Young designers thanked Layla for proving that expensive schools and family connections weren't required for success. Social justice advocates celebrated her representation of sustainable, ethical fashion. Layla read it all from her apartment, her phone buzzing constantly with notifications. Mira sat beside her, scrolling through responses and occasionally reading the particularly meaningful ones aloud. "Listen to this one," Mira said. "I'm a hotel housekeeper who paints in my spare time. I've been too scared to submit to galleries because I'm afraid they'll judge me for my day job. Watching Layla's courage gave me the strength to finally try. Thank you for showing us we're more than our circumstances." Layla wiped her eyes. "I didn't think about other people. I was just trying to survive. That's exactly why it matters. You didn't perform courage for cameras. You lived it because you had no choice. People recognize that authenticity." A knock at the door interrupted them. Layla opened it to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of flowers, roses in every shade of red, burgundy, and cream. The card read, "For the designer who taught me to see. Thank you for your patience with my education. Looking forward to our collaboration. K." Mira read over her shoulder and grinned. "Oh, he's smooth. It's professional." "Sure it is. That's why he chose flowers that match your award-winning dress." Layla couldn't help smiling. "Shut up." But that smile faded when she checked her messages and found several from unknown numbers. Most were opportunities, interview requests, collaboration offers, an invitation to speak at a design school. But one message stood out, its tone sharp and threatening. "You stole from the palace and everyone knows it. Enjoy your fame while it lasts. When the truth comes out, you'll lose everything." A friend. Layla's blood ran cold. She showed Mira, who frowned. "That's definitely from Rania or one of her circle. They're trying to scare you." "Maybe they should. Maybe I did overstep. Those materials belonged to the palace." "Stop." Mira gripped her shoulders. "You used discarded items with permission. Amir documented everything. They have nothing except spite and wounded pride. Wounded pride can be dangerous. So can talent and courage. And you have both." Over the next few days, the battle lines became clear. Rania's camp launched a PR offensive, painting Layla as a manipulative social climber. They dug into her past, finding the failure of her first studio and spinning it as evidence of incompetence. They questioned her education, her credentials, her right to be taken seriously. But Kareem's foundation fought back, not with attacks, but with action. They released documentation showing Layla's materials were legitimately sourced from palace waste. They shared testimonials from the competition judges. They posted photos of her detailed sketches and work process. Most effectively, they shared Kareem's own statement. "I made a mistake when I judged Miss Benson based on her position, rather than her talent. I won't compound that mistake by allowing others to do the same. Her work speaks for itself. Either you see the quality or you don't. But your blindness doesn't diminish her vision." The statement was shared thousands of times. It showed up on fashion blogs and news sites, and slowly, inevitably, public opinion shifted. Rania's reputation began to crumble like sand. People remembered her history of mistreating staff. Former employees came forward with stories of her cruelty. Business partners quietly distanced themselves from her family's companies. Within a week, she'd gone from Dubai's golden girl to its cautionary tale. Layla watched it happen with mixed feelings. She'd never wanted to destroy Rania. She'd just wanted to be seen. One evening, as she sat in her apartment working on sketches for Kareem's commission, Mira burst through the door with her laptop. "You need to see this." She turned the screen toward Layla. It showed a live stream. Rania, standing in front of cameras at what looked like a hastily arranged press conference. Her makeup was perfect as always, but her eyes were hard. "I want to address the recent allegations," Rania said, her voice brittle. "Yes, I was engaged to Prince Kareem. Yes, that engagement has ended. But not because of some maid with delusions of grandeur. It ended because Kareem changed. He became someone I no longer recognized." She paused as if gathering strength. "As for Layla Benson, I acknowledge that I may have been unkind. Service work is demanding, and I should have shown more appreciation for those who facilitate my lifestyle." It was the closest thing to an apology Rania was capable of giving, and it was grudging at best. "However," she continued, her voice sharpening, "I want everyone watching to understand something. Just because someone overcomes obstacles doesn't make them a hero. Just because they work hard doesn't mean they deserve success. Some people are meant to serve. That's the natural order, and no amount of public sympathy changes that." Mira slammed the laptop shut. "She's unbelievable." But Layla felt something unexpected. Not anger, not triumph. Just a profound sadness for someone so trapped in their own worldview that they couldn't imagine another way to live. "She's already lost," Layla said quietly. "She just doesn't know it yet." 2 weeks after the gala, Kareem's assistant called to schedule their first official design consultation. Not at the palace this time. At a proper studio space the foundation had rented for Layla. When she arrived, she found a sun-filled room with cutting tables, sewing machines, bolts of fabric in every color imaginable, and a note on the main table. "For LB Atelier. May your next chapter be as beautiful as your last. The Al-Hassan Foundation." Layla stood in the center of the space, turning slowly to take it all in. This was real. This was hers. This was the second chance she'd stopped believing in. Kareem arrived an hour later, dressed casually in jeans and a button-down shirt. He looked around the studio and smiled. "What do you think?" "I think I might be dreaming." "Then let's dream together. Show me what you're imagining for the gala piece." They spent the next 3 hours discussing designs, themes, and possibilities. Kareem talked about his mother's philosophy, about what the foundation meant to him. Layla sketched while he talked, her pencil capturing ideas as they emerged. And somewhere in that conversation, something shifted between them. The prince and the maid dissolved, leaving just two people who understood loss and transformation and the courage it took to become something new. When Kareem finally left that evening, he paused at the door. "Layla?" "Yes?" "Thank you for not giving up. On yourself, on your art, on the possibility that people can change." He smiled softly. "You made me want to be better. That's a rare gift." After he left, Layla stood alone in her new studio, her heart full of something that felt dangerously close to hope. Her phone buzzed. Mira's text read, "How did it go?" Layla looked around the studio one more time, then typed her response. "I think maybe we're both becoming the people we were always meant to be." Outside, the Dubai sun set in shades of burgundy and gold, painting the sky in colors that matched Layla's dreams. 3 months had passed since the gala that changed Layla's life. 3 months of early mornings in her new studio, of fabric and thread and dreams finally taking tangible form. 3 months of slowly learning to believe that this new reality wasn't a temporary gift that would be snatched away. The studio had become her sanctuary. Morning sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating cutting tables covered with sketches and fabric samples. One wall displayed her growing portfolio, designs ranging from evening wear to everyday pieces, each one carrying her signature philosophy of sustainable elegance. But the centerpiece of the space was a dress form near the main window, draped in silk, the color of desert sand at sunset. This was the commission piece for Kareem's humanitarian gala, nearly complete after weeks of meticulous work. Layla stood back, examining the drape of the fabric. The dress incorporated traditional Middle Eastern design elements with modern sustainability. Hand-dyed silk using natural pigments, embroidery thread made from recycled materials, and a silhouette that honored both modesty and movement. "You're frowning again." She turned to find Mira entering with coffee and pastries from the cafe downstairs. Her sister had officially become her business partner last month, handling the administrative side while Layla focused on design. "It's not quite right," Layla said, gesturing to the neckline. "The embroidery is too heavy here. It pulls the eye down instead of across." Mira set down the coffee and studied the dress. "You're probably right, but you know what? It's already beautiful. You're allowed to let something be finished. This is for Kareem's foundation. It needs to be perfect. It will be. But Layla," Mira touched her shoulder gently, "he's not going to judge you if it's 99% perfect instead of 100%. You know that, right?" Layla smiled despite herself. "I know. Old habits." The truth was, her relationship with Kareem had evolved into something she still didn't quite know how to name. They met twice a week to discuss the commission, but those meetings had gradually transformed into longer conversations over tea, then dinner, then evening walks through the design district. He'd never once mentioned their past dynamic, the prince and the maid. Instead, he treated her as an equal, sought her opinions on foundation initiatives, and listened when she talked about her vision for ethical fashion. Last week, he'd shown up at the studio unannounced with a box of rare fabric samples from a sustainable textile producer in India. "I thought you might find these interesting," he'd said, his eyes lighting up when she'd gasped at the quality. "This must have cost a fortune," she'd protested. "Consider it an investment in the foundation's future designer in residence." He'd paused at the door, then turned back. "Or consider it a gift from someone who enjoys seeing you happy. Your choice how to frame it." She'd chosen to frame it as both. Now standing in her studio with Mira, Layla found herself thinking about that moment more than she should. About the way Kareem's expression had softened when she smiled. About how their hands had brushed when he handed her the samples, and how neither of them had pulled away immediately. Earth to Layla. Mira waved a hand in front of her face. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "That thing where you think about Kareem and get all dreamy-eyed." "I don't get dreamy-eyed." "Sis, you absolutely do, and for the record, I approve. He's proven himself. He's done the work to change. And more importantly, he looks at you like you hung the moon." "He does not." "He absolutely does. Everyone sees it except apparently you two." Mira grinned. "Now drink your coffee and finish that dress so we can focus on the real question. Which is, what you're wearing to the gala when you present it." That evening, Layla worked late adjusting the embroidery on the commission piece. She'd just finished repositioning the final beadwork when her phone buzzed. Kareem's name appeared on the screen. "Still at the studio?" His text read. "How did you know?" "I drove past and saw the lights on. May I come up? I have something to show you." 10 minutes later, Kareem arrived carrying a portfolio case. He'd dressed down in dark jeans and a simple shirt, but somehow he still carried that presence that made rooms feel smaller and air feel charged. "You're working too hard," he said, setting down the case and examining her progress on the dress. His expression shifted to something like awe. "Layla, this is extraordinary. You haven't seen it finished yet. I don't need to. I can see the vision." He circled the dress form slowly. "My mother would have loved this. The way you've honored tradition while pushing it forward. The sustainability woven into every choice. This is exactly what the foundation should represent." His voice had gone soft on the mention of his mother, and Layla felt her heart squeeze. I wish I could have met her. She would have seen your talent immediately. She had a gift for recognizing potential in people. He turned to face Layla. I inherited her wealth and position, but not that gift. I had to learn it the hard way. Maybe that makes it more valuable. Things we earn tend to mean more than things we inherit. Kareem smiled, that real smile she'd come to treasure. Speaking of things earned, I wanted to show you something. He opened the portfolio case and pulled out architectural plans. The foundation is opening a new training center. We'll teach traditional crafts to young people from disadvantaged backgrounds: sewing, weaving, metalwork, carpentry. Layla studied the plans, her excitement growing. This is incredible. The studio spaces are generous and the natural lighting. She stopped, noticing a section labeled Designer Mentorship Program. Her name was listed as Program Director. Kareem, I can't. Before you say no, hear me out. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something subtle and expensive. You've already been doing this informally. 3 of your studio assistants came from service backgrounds. You're teaching them not just to sew, but to dream. The foundation wants to formalize that, pay you properly for your expertise, and expand the reach. I don't have teaching credentials. You have something better. You have lived experience and genuine compassion. You understand what it means to have talent but no opportunity. His voice softened. You understand what it means to be invisible until someone finally sees you. Layla's eyes stung with unexpected tears. You're not making this easy. Good. You shouldn't get to hide your light anymore. The world needs what you have to offer. He reached out, hesitated, then gently touched her hand. I need what you have to offer. Your perspective, your integrity, your reminder that privilege means nothing without purpose. His hand was warm over hers. Neither of them moved to break the contact. Kareem, she whispered, what are we doing? I don't know, he admitted. But I know that every time I leave your studio, I find excuses to come back. I know that you've changed how I see the world, how I see myself. And I know that somewhere between the maid I dismissed and the designer I commissioned, I found someone who makes me want to be worthy of her respect. Layla's breath caught. You're already worthy. Then maybe we're both becoming the people we were meant to be. He smiled, squeezing her hand gently before releasing it. Think about the program. No pressure, but I hope you'll say yes. After he left, Layla stood alone in her studio, her hand still warm from his touch, her heart full of possibilities she'd stopped letting herself imagine. The humanitarian gala arrived on a perfect Dubai evening. The venue was an outdoor garden space with fountains and thousands of lights strung between palm trees. The dress code was formal, and the guest list read like a who's who of Middle Eastern society and international philanthropy. Layla arrived early for setup, wearing a dress she'd designed for herself, a flowing gown in deep emerald that complemented her skin tone and her newfound confidence. Mira had insisted on professional hair and makeup, and for once, Layla had agreed. When she caught her reflection in one of the venue's mirrored columns, she barely recognized herself. Not because she looked different, but because she finally looked like who she'd always been inside. The commission piece was displayed on a raised platform at the garden's center, illuminated by soft spotlights. Beside it stood a placard explaining the dress's sustainable materials and the foundation's mission. Guests began arriving as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Layla stood near her dress, ready to answer questions, her stomach fluttering with nervous energy. Marcus Whitfield was among the first to approach. Miss Benson, this is even more impressive than your competition piece. The foundation is lucky to have you. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield. That means everything coming from you. Call me Marcus, please. And I hope you're prepared for what's about to happen. Half the designers here are going to try to poach you for their studios. I'm not interested in working for anyone else. I'm building something of my own. Good. Keep that fire. He moved on, making space for other guests who'd lined up to meet her. For the next hour, Layla found herself in conversation after conversation. Buyers wanted to place orders. Magazine editors requested interviews. A manufacturer offered partnership terms. The validation was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. Then she saw movement through the crowd and looked up to find Kareem approaching. He wore traditional formal attire tonight, a crisp white thobe and elegant bisht that made him look every inch the prince he was. But his eyes held that warmth she'd come to recognize, that softness reserved just for her. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself." He laughed, and the sound felt like coming home. "Walk with me. There's something I want to show you before the formal program begins." He led her away from the main gathering, down a lamplit path toward a quieter section of the garden. Here, the fountains gurgled softly, and the party noise faded to a pleasant murmur. "Do you remember the day you stood in my ballroom while everyone laughed?" Kareem asked. Layla's chest tightened. "It's not exactly a memory I've tried to preserve. I've thought about that day constantly, not because I'm proud of it, but because it taught me something crucial." He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. "You stood there with such dignity, such quiet strength. You didn't lash out or crumble. You simply endured, and then you transformed that pain into purpose. I didn't have much choice. That's what makes it powerful. You could have given up. You could have let our cruelty define you. Instead, you let it refine you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small jewelry box. "Which brings me to this." Layla's heart hammered. "Kareem, what?" "It's not what you're thinking," he said quickly, though his smile suggested he wasn't entirely unhappy about her assumption. "Open it." Inside the box lay a delicate necklace, a single pendant in the shape of a sewing needle, crafted from gold and set with tiny diamonds. "It's beautiful," Layla whispered. "It's a reminder of where you started, where you are, and where you're going. Of the tools you use to build your dreams." He carefully lifted the necklace from the box. "May I?" She nodded, turning so he could fasten it around her neck. His fingers brushed her skin, and she felt that touch like electricity. "There's something else I need to say," Kareem said, his voice low. "That day in the ballroom I made a joke, a cruel, thoughtless joke. I said if you fit into that dress, I'd marry you." Layla's breath stopped. "Kareem, let me finish." He moved to stand in front of her again, his expression serious. "You've spent these months transforming yourself, achieving incredible things. But here's what I've realized. You outgrew that dress in every way that matters. Not by fitting into it, but by becoming so much larger than the small box I tried to put you in." He took her hands in his, and this time there was no hesitation. "So I need to ask you something different now. Not because of a dress, and not because I'm trying to make amends for past cruelty, but because over these months, watching you work and dream and build and teach, I've fallen completely in love with you." Layla felt tears spill down her cheeks. "Kareem, I'm not asking you to marry me, not tonight. I know there are things we need to navigate, public perception, cultural expectations, the complicated history between us. But I'm asking if you'll consider building a future with me, not as prince and subject, not as patron and artist, but as equals who challenge each other to be better. You're asking if I'll date you?" He laughed, a slightly nervous sound. "When you put it that way, it sounds absurdly normal. Maybe normal is exactly what we need." Layla squeezed his hands, her heart so full it ached. "Yes, to all of it. The future, the challenge, the partnership. Yes." Kareem's face transformed with joy. He pulled her into an embrace, holding her close like she was something precious. "Thank you for not giving up on me when I didn't deserve your patience. Thank you for finally seeing me." They stood like that for a long moment, the garden lights twinkling around them, the sound of the gala, a distant celebration that mirrored the one in their hearts. When they finally returned to the party, hand in hand, the guests noticed. Cameras flashed, whispers spread. But Layla found she didn't care about the speculation or the stories that would be written. She'd learned that the only story that mattered was the one she wrote for herself. The months that followed were a whirlwind of growth and change. Layla Couture officially launched as a brand, with Mira handling business operations and a small team of designers and seamstresses, all women from working-class backgrounds who Layla was training personally. The training center opened to enormous success. Layla spent 2 days a week there, teaching young people not just craft skills but confidence, not just technique but vision. Kareem continued his foundation work, increasingly focused on initiatives that created opportunity rather than just charity. Their partnership, both professional and personal, became a model for how privilege could be used to lift others rather than separate them. They kept their relationship relatively private, but Dubai society eventually accepted what was obvious to anyone who saw them together. The prince and the former maid had become partners in every sense of the word. Amir retired peacefully that spring, with Layla and Kareem hosting a celebration in his honor. The old butler pulled Layla aside during the party. "I knew from the beginning," he said with a gentle smile, "that you were destined for more than service. I just didn't know how spectacular that more would be. You helped make it possible. Your kindness when I needed it most. I'll never forget that. All I did was leave some food in a refrigerator. You did the rest." 6 months after the humanitarian gala, Layla stood in the same palace ballroom where her journey had truly begun. But this time, she wasn't there as a maid. She was there as the featured designer for a fashion show benefiting the Foundation's training programs. The ballroom had been transformed into a runway. Industry professionals filled the seats, cameras lined the walls. And at the center of it all, mounted on the same golden mannequin that had once held Rania's dress, was Layla's original burgundy gown, the one that had won the competition and changed her life. But now it had a new name. A plaque beside it read, "The Promise, original design by Layla Benson for LB Atelier." A reminder that beauty can emerge from pain and that we should never underestimate the power of keeping faith with ourselves. Models walked the runway in Layla's latest collection, pieces that blended sustainability with elegance, tradition with innovation. Each garment told a story. Each design proved that fashion could be both beautiful and meaningful. Backstage, as Layla prepared for her final bow, Kareem found her. He'd been sitting in the front row all evening, and his pride had been visible from the stage. "Ready for this?" he asked. "As ready as I'll ever be. Then there's one more thing." He pulled out a small velvet box, different from the necklace box and somehow more significant. "I know I said I wouldn't ask yet. I know we're still navigating complicated waters. But watching you tonight, seeing everything you've built, I can't wait anymore." He opened the box, revealing a ring, simple, elegant, with a single perfect diamond. "Layla Benson, you've taught me that true nobility has nothing to do with titles. That real wealth is measured in purpose and integrity, and the courage to become who we're meant to be." He dropped to one knee right there backstage, with the sounds of the fashion show continuing beyond the curtain. "Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife? Not because of some joke about a dress, but because I love you more than I thought possible to love anyone." Layla looked down at this man who'd transformed from her tormentor to her champion, who'd done the difficult work of changing himself, who'd learned to see beyond surfaces to the human heart beneath. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into a kiss that felt like a promise and a beginning all at once. The show coordinator rushed over. "Miss Benson, you're on in 30 seconds for final bow." "Oh." She stopped short, taking in the scene. "Should I delay?" "No," Layla said, laughing through happy tears. "I'm ready." She walked onto that runway, holding Kareem's hand. And when the audience saw them together, saw the ring on her finger and the joy on their faces, the applause was deafening. Reporters surged forward with questions. When's the wedding? How did he propose? What does this mean for the foundation? But Layla only had eyes for the burgundy dress at the room's center, the dress that had started everything. She walked toward it slowly, Kareem beside her, and stood there for a moment in silence. "They said I'd never fit in that dress," she finally said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet ballroom. Cameras captured every word. They were right. I was never meant to fit in. I was meant to stand out, to create, to transform, to become exactly who I was always destined to be. She turned to the crowd, her hand still in Kareem's. "This dress represents a promise I made to myself, that I wouldn't let anyone else's limitations define my possibilities. Tonight, I'm making a new promise. To every person who's been told they're not enough, who's been made to feel invisible, who's been laughed at for dreaming, your story isn't over. Your value isn't determined by others' blindness, and your dreams are worth fighting for." The ballroom erupted in applause again. Flashbulbs created a constellation of light, and somewhere in the back of the room, barely noticed by anyone, a figure in simple clothes slipped in to watch. Rania stood in the shadows, her face pale and drawn. She'd lost weight, lost her status, lost the easy life she'd taken for granted. Her family's business had collapsed under the weight of accumulated scandals and bad publicity. She worked now, actually worked, in a job that required humility she'd never learned. She watched Layla accept congratulations and praise, watched Kareem look at his fiancée with unmistakable love, and felt something crack inside her chest. Not jealousy, though there was some of that. Something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, of opportunities wasted and cruelties that couldn't be undone. As the crowd began to disperse, Rania moved toward the exit. But at the door, she turned back for one final look. Layla stood beside her dress, Kareem at her side, both of them laughing about something. The burgundy fabric caught the light, and for just a moment, Rania saw what she'd missed before. The artistry, the skill, the soul embedded in every stitch. "I'm sorry," Rania whispered to the empty air, to the woman who'd never hear it, to the person she'd failed to become. Then she left, disappearing into the Dubai night. Inside, the celebration continued into the evening. Mira gave a tearful toast about her sister's courage. Amir, brought back for this special occasion, shared stories about Layla's quiet determination during her service days. Marcus Whitfield announced that 3 major fashion houses had bid for the rights to carry Layla Couture internationally. But the moment Layla would remember most came later, when the guests had gone and only she and Kareem remained in the empty ballroom. "We should probably go," Kareem said, but neither of them moved. "Not yet." Layla walked to the center of the room, to the spot where she'd stood months ago while people laughed. "I need to remember what this felt like, the fear and the shame and the determination, so I never forget where I came from." Kareem joined her in the center of the floor. "You could never forget. It's written into everything you create. Promise me something. Anything. Promise that when we have children, when we build our life together, we'll teach them that kindness matters more than status. that seeing people's humanity is a greater gift than any wealth or title. I promise, and I promise to keep learning, to keep growing, to keep earning the privilege of being loved by you." They stood together in the empty ballroom, two people who'd traveled impossible distances to find each other. Outside, Dubai glittered with a million lights. Inside, the burgundy dress shimmered softly, a monument to transformation and hope. Layla rested her head on Kareem's shoulder and smiled. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "If I had fit into that original dress, Rania's dress, this never would have happened. I would have won a joke, not my life." "So you're saying my cruelty was secretly a blessing?" "I'm saying that sometimes the universe has a strange sense of humor." She lifted her head to look at him. "And sometimes the people who hurt us become the people who help us fly. Not by what they did, but by what we chose to do in response." Kareem kissed her softly. "Then let's keep flying. Together." They turned off the ballroom lights and walked out hand in hand, leaving the burgundy dress to stand guard in the darkness. Above it, a banner had been hung for tomorrow's public exhibition. The dress that started it all, the Layla Benson collection, proof that dreams don't have size limits. And in the morning, when visitors would file through to see the dress and learn Layla's story, they would read those words and maybe, just maybe, believe that their own impossible dreams might be possible after all. Because Layla Benson had proven something that night in the marble ballroom, and every day since. You don't need to fit into anyone's definition of success. You just need to have the courage to create your own. When someone measures your worth by what you lack rather than what you carry inside, do you shrink to fit their vision, or do you expand until they have no choice but to see you? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of transformation and triumph.